There we are. Welcome, one and all, to Cus I Wanna, the show that happens when we want it to happen. I'm your host, Forrest Valkai, and I am joined today by my dear friend, the lovely and handsome and oh so generous Qasim Rashid. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, brother. It's a privilege to be here with you, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's a privilege to have you. So you've never been on the channel before, but
Yeah.
I've been following you for a long time. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, I have yet to see any content that you've put out that I haven't been screaming at my phone, yes, I have yet to see something that you put out that I haven't just wholeheartedly agreed with. And I am excited for the day when that happens. But
Well, I'm sure when that happens, it's going to be an opportunity for us to converse and figure out things logically. I think that's why I appreciate your content so much as well, because you bring things from a perspective of logic and rationale, and it's really hard to argue against. So I appreciate that about you.
That's really cool of you, man. That's very kind of you. I would love to talk at length about how much I love your stuff, but I would rather the audience get to know you from you. Could you please indulge us and just introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, and why it's so freaking amazing.
Thanks, man. Qasim Rashid. I'm an attorney. I'm a human rights lawyer, an immigrant to this country, born in Pakistan, raised here since I was about 4 or 5 years old. I think one of the reasons I went into human rights law was my birth country of Pakistan is a nation that's founded on something that I cherish, and that's separation of religion and state. And it's unfortunately devolved into this quasi-theocracy, full-blown theocracy, depending on who you ask. And this nation, the United States, is another country founded on separation of religion and state, which is unfortunately being challenged aggressively right now, and I feel like we're losing that battle. And so a lot of the work I've done over the last 2 decades, the whole content creation space has kind of, exploded over the last 4 or 5 years. And I tell folks, you can find letters to the editor I wrote 20 years ago in the wake of 9/11, combating Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bias and misogyny and you name it. And I think where I am now, it's a place of recognizing that I'm fortunate to have a platform. I'm fortunate to be an attorney, to understand the law, how the law works, how it applies. And I have an obligation to use that platform for good, to elevate marginalized voices, to ensure we're fighting for racial, social, economic justice from a basic, humanitarian standpoint. And the qualification to me is, are you a human being? Great. You deserve equal humanity. Look to everybody else, regardless of your background, your faith or no faith, your nationality, your ethnicity. And that's kind of my driving focus. How do we create a world where every person can live with freedom of conscience, with their basic necessities provided for, so that they can be the best version of themselves? And so far, it's been a wild ride. One, because it's interesting to see who attacks you for it. But two, because it's been gratifying to be able to look in the mirror and know that, hey, I'm doing this because I believe in this sacred principle of equal justice for all people, and it's kind of my North Star, and it's something that I cherish, and it's allowed me to find amazing leaders like you who come from a different background but have the same principles and values, and I think that's what makes this conversation so special.
How dare you turn that around to flatter me at the end? But most importantly, do you guys see what I'm talking about here? This is why this man and I are friends. It's so good because I love that. I love that you're bringing something so personal to make something so impactful. And especially the fact that, like you said, we come from vastly different backgrounds, but we have such a similar root in just humanism and the common good. And one thing that I try to argue for quite a bit on shows like this is that we're a skeptic network, and we promote skepticism. We do these shows all about skepticism, which usually ends into atheism and all sorts of other things. But the point of skepticism that I try to put out there is that if you're doing skepticism right, you end up as a humanist. You end up as somebody who is trying to make the world a better place. It is, in my opinion, impossible to be a skeptic and also be a racist, and also be sexist, and also be homophobic, and also be transphobic, and also be any of these hindrances that have been holding society back for millennia. Critical thinking is the cure. It is the antidote to these things. And so on this network and other shows that I do in this whole community, this is such an important guiding light. This like, I think you used the word North Star. You know what I mean? It is such an important point, and I love the way that can bring so many diverse people together to try to make things just to try to ameliorate this shitty situation we're in for absolutely everybody. And the shitty situation that we're in is one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you here, because you, as a lawyer, specifically a human rights lawyer, have had some really poignant things to say about the Trump and Musk administration. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to dig into it as much as we can. I wrote to you a couple of weeks ago when things were starting to get worse, when I was just on fire and I wanted to get on here and just scream. And then I had to go to Borneo for a month. And now I'm back and scruffier than ever, and tired. And I have a little less scream in me. But Lord, I have not, I do not want to miss the opportunity to rally against the dictatorship and blossom that we're going with right now. So, like, first things first, there's a number that will pop up on the bottom of the screen here in just a second, 720-619-2288. That number is for anybody out there who is at this moment still supporting Donald Trump, still supporting MAGA, still supporting the efforts of Elon Musk, although I hear they're having a big falling out now. The breakup has been pretty messy. Still supporting the insanity that is going on in the upper echelons of our government. If you are still a Trump supporter, if you were at the beginning of this, if you were up into this election, we have some questions, we have some problems. But even, especially now, if you are still a Trump supporter, give us a call, because I would love to know how you are able to justify this complete divorce from the constitutional republic that you supposedly love as a right-winger, as a Republican, as a conservative, the traditional conservative values or whatever that people have been resting on while voting for this rapist, bigoted idiot. Now we're at this point where we are so far away from that. I would love to talk to somebody who has something to say about it. So the number, again, on the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288, or you can use the web link in the description and call in over them internets as well. This show is for you. If you have something that you want to talk about, if you think that you have an argument about, yes, of course, we're stripping away people's civil liberties and we're ignoring the Constitution and we're getting rid of due process and we're hurting citizens and non-citizens alike. But, like, Kamala's laugh was weird. If you want to call in about it, this is your time to do so. And while we wait for those calls, I want to ask you, my dude, like, what's your vibe at this moment? Like, what's going through your head just living in America today as a lawyer, as an immigrant, as a human? Like, how are you doing?
I'm managing, and I think that's the best way I can describe it. Look, I think we need to acknowledge two truths. One truth is what the Trump regime is doing is not approaching fascism. We're there. We need to recognize that. When we're detaining people based off of skin color, off of perception, when we're arresting folks and deporting them to a foreign country to avoid a prosecution here, remember, there's a reason why there's death camps and concentration camps outside of Germany during the Nazi era. That was on purpose. That wasn't on accident. So this is not a unique playbook. Remember, Hitler got his race laws not out of thin air, but from American Jim Crow laws. There's a fascinating and horrifying book by Professor Whitman of Princeton University called Hitler's American Model that shows how the Nazi lawyers came to the United States to study our miscegenation and race-conscious laws and racist laws, and went back to Germany, and they said, "Hey, we might be Nazis, but we are not Americans. Let's slow down here. We're not that bad." And that's a fact. And so people are like, "Well, Trump is acting like a Nazi," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, but he's also acting like how America has actually been for much of its history. So stop saying this is unprecedented. This is unfortunately extraordinarily precedented." And the again in MAGA has always meant a revival of Jim Crow America. And we're seeing that over and over again. So I think we need to acknowledge that as one truth. I think the second truth we need to acknowledge is that this does not happen overnight. This happened when George Bush faced no accountability for illegally invading Iraq and Afghanistan, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. This happened when there was no accountability for Barack Obama increasing the drone program and drone striking U.S. citizens and killing them. By one estimate, more than 90% of the people killed in the drone program were completely innocent, had no wrongdoing whatsoever. And even if they were guilty, they were still denied due process of law. This happened because after January 6th, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland were stuck on norms and didn't have the courage or the dignity or the decency to prosecute somebody who everybody was explicitly clear was responsible. You know, as Mitch McConnell famously said, morally, practically responsible for the violence of that day. And so I want to be clear that where we are is not because we were doing our best and oops, this happened. This was a very predictable result of decades of apathy, decades of allowing billionaires to buy our elections, and decades of a lack of accountability. And I want to be careful because I know someone's going to say, well, there you go, both sidesing it. I'm not actually both sidesing it. What I'm telling you is that our standard of justice has to be consistent throughout. And just because Bush committed war crimes doesn't mean we look the other way when Barack Obama committed maybe slightly smaller war crimes. Just because Trump was president doesn't mean you can say no one is above the law and then say, well, asterisks for that one guy. This is the inevitable result, unfortunately. And until we can stand in a sense of class solidarity, working people, left and right, against this corrupting oligarchy billionaire class, we're gonna continue to fall apart. And that's why I'm not actually convinced that Trump and Musk are fighting. I really don't think they are. Remember, Trump and Musk were fighting before, years ago, where Trump said that Musk came and begged on his knees, and I could have asked him to beg on his knees, and he would have done it. Billionaires will always back billionaires, and when they fight, it's poor people going to war and killing each other for billionaire interests. So I wrote a piece a couple days ago about don't get distracted by what these billionaires are doing, because at the end of the day, they're looking out for their financial interests and for themselves. And the last thing we need to do is lose sight of the fact that they're stripping away our basic human dignity, our basic civil rights. And that's why a lot of the work I'm doing, that's why I appreciate what you're doing here, Forrest, is trying to dialogue with folks on the right to say, I am not your enemy. You are not my enemy. We need to recognize that this is economic warfare against us, and we need to stand united against these billionaires trying to tear apart our republic.
That is the key. And it's like when we talk about this stuff, like obviously, this show, it's going to be, somewhat antagonistic if someone calls in, we're going to, but like the trying to get that point across of the modus operandi of, every administration I can remember in my lifetime has been like, as long as we can keep white people hating black people, as long as we can keep straight people hating gay people, as long as we can keep cis people hating trans people, as long as we can keep poor people hating poorer people, as long as we can keep the torches people hating the pitchfork people, nobody will recognize who the actual problem is, because the one dangerous minority in the world is billionaires. And so, yes, trying to get this across that, no matter, like we have and are likely to continue to say some pretty hateful shit about MAGA Republicans on this show, but like, to their credit, they want the same thing that I want, the same thing that any of us want. They want to live in peace, and they want a prosperous future for their children. They want to live in a country that takes care of them and their family. And so the kind of fear-mongering tactics that we see, where every single speech is, these people are coming to take your rights, these people are coming to take your jobs, these people are hurting your children, these people are hurting your groceries, those kinds of tactics work. And if we could just get across that these issues that we're facing are not left versus right issues, they are top versus bottom issues, maybe we could move forward a little bit faster. And that's why I don't think you're at risk, especially with this audience. I don't think you're at risk of being accused of both sidesing anything, because like I'll criticize Donald Trump all day long, and someone will turn around to me and the first thing they say is like, well, Obama or Biden did it. Do not confuse me for a Biden supporter or Obama supporter. Please, I am not a liberal. I am not a Democrat. I am so much farther left than whatever the hell you think it is. I just need you to understand that I don't like fascists. Like, that's all it is. And that is so important. What you said at the beginning about how this is not where we're at right now, this is not on the road to fascism. This is not a risk of fascism. This is not liberals calling everything they don't like fascism. This is fucking fascism.
Yep.
When we have Mahmoud Khalil being black-bagged off the sidewalk because he was using his First Amendment rights, it doesn't matter if he was an immigrant or a visa holder or a green card holder or it does. None of it matters. He could have been a freaking terrorist standing on the street speaking freely. If he was arrested for speaking freely, we have a problem. When you have Kilmaro Brega Garcia sent to a freaking Central American death camp and the Supreme Court votes unanimously, tell me one situation which this Supreme Court would vote unanimously on. You could ask them if the sky is blue. They would have some controversy. And they vote unanimously, yes, unequivocally, this is wrong. You need to bring this guy home. And the president of the United States says, nah. And then we have him in an interview asked, should you uphold the Constitution? He says, I don't know. It's like, it blows my mind that anybody could hear this and see this and still think that this is not just right, but American. It is the most anti-American thing that I've ever seen. And what blows my mind the most about it is that I've always had this idea in my head growing up that, it would be some sign of a fight. If a dictator ever tried to take over America, we'd have this kind of thing. But apparently not. Apparently, this guy can just be like, I don't want to do the law. And Congress is like, what more could we possibly do? And now we're just here.
Well, I don't know if you heard, but Chuck Schumer wrote a strongly worded letter with very strong words.
Yes.
I mean, the strongest words that are out there. That to me is pretty much why we elected him, to write strongly worded letters. And I don't know what else we can expect. I mean, it's ridiculous. You got Hakeem Jeffries wearing like Knicks gear and posing in a jersey for his Instagram. I'm like, come on, dude. Are you like a high school junior trying to impress a prom date? Or are you the minority leader of House Democrats? Like, do something more than this. And I think part of it is it goes back to the two original sins of this country, right? This country was founded on the genocide of one people, indigenous people, and on the genocide and enslavement of another people, African and Black Americans. And there's never been any kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There's never been any kind of reparations of any meaningful sort for Native Americans or of any sort at all for Black Americans. And on the contrary, we see a continual erasure of the history that caused. I mean, just for God's sake, in 2025, you're in Tulsa. The Tulsa mayor finally, first Black mayor, I think, finally says, yes, we're going to have reparations for the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. 104 years after the fact. Don't even get me started on reparations for redlining and Jim Crow, or the fact that white majority schools get $20 billion more in funding every year than Black and Latino majority schools, and we're like, why is there an achievement gap? Well, because they give them $20 billion goddamn more dollars. What else do you think is going to happen? Like, this is not rocket science. We're crying out loud. And so this is why a lot of what I go back to is show me the economic model here, because you want to talk about racial justice, let's talk about reparations. You want to talk about closing or gender justice, let's talk about closing the wage gap. You want to talk about immigration justice, let's ensure that immigrants have equal access, whether they're documented or undocumented, as the white undocumented immigrants had for centuries coming into this country. But we're not ready to have that economic model. And this applies to everything, by the way. You want to have this big debate about Medicaid right now? The single reason we don't have universal health care in this country is because white supremacists said, we would rather die than let Black people have health care. So we're going to go ahead and make that bet. We'll let some of our poors be killed to ensure all the Black folks are killed. And until we can have meaningful, I'm getting all animated here, until we can have a meaningful conversation about that, all the rest of the stuff is just crap. It's not going to get us anywhere.
You do not have to apologize about being animated. I'm going to be bouncing off the walls for this entire show, as I usually am. And you're absolutely right. It's so frustrating to have to deal with this discourse continually and to have to just show again and again that, like, it is very clearly I think, how do I say, the discourse, the political discourse in our government, not necessarily like among the people, but just in Congress, is for my entire lifetime, hasn't necessarily been how do we make the American people succeed. It is how do I make the other side lose. And I don't care how many of my party I hurt. I don't care how many of my constituents I hurt, as long as I hurt them more. And that fucking blows because we treat politics like this dumbass team sport when it reminds me of like relationship advice is if I were to tell somebody, like, if you're in an argument with your spouse, it shouldn't be you versus them. It should be the both of you against the problem, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing with the politics that we see here. It is never Democrats and Republicans versus poverty. It is never Democrats and Republicans versus a crisis, an epidemic, a drug problem, or whatever. It is always Democrats versus Republicans. And the people are the collateral damage in that dumbass war. So we have some calls waiting, and I want to jump into them because holy crap, we have a lot to talk about here. And also, I want to throw in to the people in the chat who we've already had to mute. The chat is not for the debate. The calls are for the debate. We don't want to hear your bullshit in the chat. Chatters don't want to tune into that. Call the number on the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288. To the person who said that it's crazy that we don't consider the Biden administration to be fascist, call in and tell us how the fuck it was. Let's talk about that. To the person who just is literally this, I had. You familiar with Austin Archer?
No, who's Austin Archer?
Oh, he's great. Who is Austin Archer? He's great. He's a musician on TikTok, and we had him on a few times. He actually hosts on this show now from time to time. And we were doing a political show, and someone's in the chat just posting Trump in all caps, and we're having to like delete their comments and everything. And he's like, wait, he posted Trump's in all caps. I've never thought about it that way. Amazing. Wow, you're making some good points. Let's talk to Ted. Pronouns he, him, calling in from Wallaby Anus, who says that President Trump has some good ideas. Ted, you're on the line with Qasim and Forrest. How you doing today?
Doing good. You guys hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
So what specific good ideas has President Trump put forward?
I think what he's done on the trans issues and sort of broader wokeness is good. And I also support securing the southern border, which Biden completely failed at.
Okay. Can you define what is wokeness for me?
So wokeness is intersectionality, if you might have heard of that idea. So it's sort of looking at society through identity groups. Like
so
white
you
people versus
don't believe
black
that
people,
intersectionality.
gay people versus straight.
Sorry. So
I believe that
are you defining, I just want to be very clear because I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you defining intersectionality as pitting identities against each other?
Yeah, I'm defining it as like that mindset of looking for every specific identity group you can have and looking at the oppressor versus oppressed mindset.
Okay.
So that's wokeness to me.
I've already got a million questions, but Qasim, do you want to start? You are our guest, so I'm going to take notes over here. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Well, no, that's not what intersectionality is. So your fundamental understanding of intersectionality is wrong. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined that term, talked about the recognition that people can have multiple perspectives and multiple identities that impact their life, and there are multiple aspects that intersect with one another. So, for example, if you're a woman, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be low income as well. And so that simply says that there's an intersectionality between being a woman and poverty. That's it. It's just acknowledging that reality. It says that if you're low income, whether you're black or white or brown or yellow or purple, what have you.
Yeah, this is pretty much what I was saying. This is what I was saying. This is exactly what I was saying. No.
Okay, good. So you think it's bad?
Either way,
so you think it's bad to recognize that poverty afflicts women more than it afflicts men?
Yeah, I think it's a toxic, divisive mindset. We should look at people as individuals. We shouldn't look at people through their race, through their every identity group they have.
Yeah, but that's not the question I asked, though. So what I asked was, do you think it's bad to recognize that poverty harms women more than it harms men?
I don't think it's bad to recognize that inherently, but I think our society had an obsessive.
That is the concept of intersectionality.
Obsessive with identity groups, right? And our society became obsessive with that mindset.
So Ted, just to be clear, you do understand? Like, surely you agree that when we're talking about these identity markers, be it racial, sexual, sexuality, gender, whatever, like when we're talking about these identity markers, do you agree they do exist? I'm sure, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like I'm not just a blob of human. I am a man. I am also a male. I'm white. I guess middle class. I don't know what words mean in that case, but like these are all things that I can use to describe myself. And inherently, do you also agree that those would also give you some insight into my situation as an American?
This is where I lose track of things. Like, I don't think that anybody has any greater opinion just because they were born in a so-called
That's not what I just
whatever.
asked. That's not what I just asked you. What I asked is, do you agree that these identity markers that I can describe about myself, if you know those things about me, you can also probably make some predictions statistically about my condition as an American?
Yeah, you can do that. But do you agree that colleges should not
Sure.
be discriminating based on race?
That what can't be?
Colleges and jobs and a lot of organizations.
They're
Should not be
not
discriminating based
supposed
on
to.
race. Yeah.
They're not supposed to, but they do. Right.
They were
and they still do.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI.
So we're going to get to that in a minute because that makes no fucking sense. But I want to just stick to where we're at right now. No, and that makes no sense at all, and we're going to talk about it here in a second. But first, I would like you to try to address what Qasim and I are trying to get across to you, which is that if we're talking, for example, about a black gay woman, right? She has individual specific problems or experiences that are circled around her being black. And she also has issues, problems, experiences, whatever, that are centered around her being a woman. And she also has problems and issues and experiences that are centered around her being gay. And she has individual experiences that are centered around her being a gay woman. And she has individual experiences that are centered around her being a black gay person. And she has individual experiences about her being a black woman. And she has each of these things each of these little categories come with their own experiences, their own problems, their own issues, and also they compound individually with one another, right? So she doesn't have just black problems, and she doesn't have just woman problems. She has those. And she has black woman problems, which is a totally different kind of thing. So, like, that's what we're talking about with intersectionality. We're just saying that, the parts of a person's identity matter. They matter to their existence and their experiences, and they matter socially and politically and economically. They matter.
No, see,
if you disagree with that,
that is wokeness. That's what wokeness is. This obsessive
what I just described.
It's this obsessive
what I just described
is all the
just reality
of each identity group and all how hard it was to be this group, and that is wokeness. We should just move on and look at people as individuals.
But Ted, I don't think you're agreeing with us, but not admitting you're agreeing with us, because I'll give you an example of my son. I have a son who has a speech impediment, right? We have to take him to therapy to pronounce words that, he's 12 now, words that 4-year-olds can pronounce just fine. At 12, he can't. He has a speech impediment, right? And that affects how he learns. It affects how he functions. It affects how he communicates. It affects how he takes tests. Now, if I were to say, hey, this is wokeness, you're obsessing over something that doesn't matter, get over it, do you think that's going to solve his handicap or his speech impediment? Or do you think we need to have a well-crafted learning lesson and therapy to get him the help and guidance he needs to overcome that speech impediment? Those are the two options. Do we ignore it and hope it goes away? Or do we acknowledge its existence and craft a lifestyle around him to get him the help and guidance he needs to be his full self? Which one?
So on an individual cases, we should do that. But I think your analogy is getting at the idea of equity, that we should be having different standards and trying to elevate certain groups, which is what I object.
Before you said but, you said on an individual case, we should do that. Okay, good. That's what intersectionality does. It recognizes that individual people have different lived experiences and different parts of their life that not everybody else may be able to experience. And we should recognize that out of empathy just because it's not an issue for us doesn't mean it's not an issue. And that's kind of the definition of privilege, right? That a privilege is something that isn't a problem because it isn't a problem for you. I'm a guy. I have male privilege. I will never know what it's like to have to hold my keys between my fingers, walking to my car late at night in fear that a man might attack me and try to rape me. That doesn't mean
That's not
that
true. Men are more likely to be the victims of violent crime.
That has not anything to do. So just to be very clear, that has nothing to do with what Qasim was just saying. What you just engaged with is a little thought stopper to try to throw out a little statistic to derail everything.
Define what a woman is. What even is a man? You said you're a man. What's a man?
Yeah, Ted, I easily can, but I'm not trying to derail the conversation on yet another fucking rabbit trail for you. We're hoping to get you to just actually honestly address what we're talking about.
So earlier, Ted, you said you agree that we should have a well-crafted piece of guidance for my son who has a speech impediment. Do you still agree with that? Or have you changed your mind?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, you agree. Okay, great. So that's what intersectionality acknowledges. That's it. What about that as a primitive? It's quite
I have a question.
I mean, this is now.
I have a question as well for Ted.
About rabbit holes. This is a rabbit hole now. Okay, what's up?
This is literally the first thing that you said that we're still trying to address. Ted, what I have an issue with is you said
pointless stuff.
This is literally, again, the first thing that you brought up that we are still trying to hash out.
Okay, just
Qasim brought up his son. Qasim brought up his son and talked about a speech impediment that he has and is trying to now ameliorate that situation for his son. And you said on an individual level that works. But when we take that to a societal level, I am paraphrasing, when you take that to a societal level and you're trying to fix all these things for all these people, then you have some big problem. My follow-up question for you, Ted, what is society made from?
It's made of people.
Individual people, right? Each one of which, like Qasim's son, has their own unique issues. So as a society, if we try to generalize everything and just make society work for this random, standard, arbitrary template of human that we think everybody should be able to live up to, you're going to miss out on literally every single person. You understand that that's a problem?
When I say I disagree with applying it to groups, I mean I don't support affirmative action and stuff like that.
So this is the yet another buzzword that you're throwing out here. Like when you said DEI and you equated DEI to discrimination. And it's like, it sounds to me like you have this image in your head that everybody who isn't a cisgendered heterosexual white man is somehow being pandered to or handed some special opportunity that you don't get or something like that. It sounds like you've bought into this nonsense. Well, that's the framework you're giving me here.
That is the admitted goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to prioritize race, at least to some degree, even if it's not the main factor.
So you said that's not at all what you believe, and then immediately started supporting that proposition. So that's frustrating. Also,
no, I didn't. So
DEI is diversity.
Civil Rights Act?
DEI. Hold on.
So
DEI stands for what?
Hiring based on
is
race.
DEI, Ted? What is DEI, Ted? Right. Which of those three things
which violates the Civil Rights Act?
Which of those things, diversity, equity, or inclusion, do you have a major problem with?
I have a major problem with equity. I support equality, not equity.
Okay. Can you please give us a difference?
The difference is that
I'm unsurprised that you have a problem with diversity, but I would like you to define equity as opposed to equality.
Right, I'm getting to that. Equity is equality of outcome. Equality is equality of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's draw a really clear-cut example.
Diversity. I have a problem with forced diversity, or the idea that it's an inherent strength.
Let's get a really clear-cut example then. We're going to get to that in a minute too. Let's get a really clear-cut, simple example, right? You said equity is equality of outcome, and equality is equality of opportunity, and that's what you're more focused on. So let's say we have a 100-meter race, right? And we have two people are going to run this race. One of them is missing a leg. Equality, the same track, the same distance, the same starting time, and they get as fast as they can go. Is that a fair race?
Yep, that's how it should work.
Okay, that's fucking dumb. Because that's the whole point of what we're talking about here is that in this country, everybody should have the opportunity to be free and happy and successful, to try to strive for life, liberty, and happiness. You can't do that if the circumstances of your birth inherently determine how successful you're going to be. So equality of opportunity alone isn't good enough. You need to guarantee that people have the equal chance to succeed, not just the same starting pistol. Do you understand why that matters?
I disagree. I think equality of opportunity is what matters, not equity.
Qasim, do you have a different example you'd like to try, or do you want to move on to the next thing?
I think where our friend is probably struggling to understand the point we're trying to make here is if he truly believed that, if he truly believed equality and not equity, then he would be at the forefront of calling for reparations for Black people over the last several hundred years. He would be the first one to be at the forefront to call for restitution for women who didn't have equal financial access until 1974, for crying out loud. He would be the first one to ensure that our immigration policies now are the same immigration policies that Europeans had for a period of about 150, 200 years, where when they arrived through virtual open borders, no visa requirement, they got
Okay, I
nearly
don't
270
support
million
this.
acres.
You don't have to go on a monologue.
Let me finish.
I don't support that stuff.
Okay, but
Yeah,
if
Ted,
you don't support that stuff, Ted.
Sorry, I apologize, Qasim. Ted, if you were listening with even half of your brain, you would realize that was the point he was making, is that you don't support those things. You weren't listening. You were just waiting for your turn to speak.
The point of this call is that we disagree. So let's get to something useful rather than just monologues.
But
see, here's the thing. What he was saying was really insightful. You should be listening to it. Qasim, please continue. I loved what you were saying. I thought it was really a good point. I hope that Ted might pick up a little tail end of it.
The point of what I'm saying is that if you truly believed in equality alone and not equity, then you would be at the forefront of calling for reparations for Black people, but you don't support that. You'd be at the forefront of calling for restitution for women, but you don't support that. You would be at the forefront of saying that immigration now should be the same as was given to white people from Europe for well over 150 years, where they got 270 million acres of land for free via the Homestead Act. What you want is for white people to have all those benefits for hundreds of years. And when Black and brown people and women say, hey, can we have laws that allow us even a fraction of that access? Now suddenly you're like, whoa. I don't make the rules. Equality is the only way to go. The hell with equity. Right. How does that make any sense whatsoever?
So do you know that Asian Americans actually have a higher median income rate and a lower incarceration rate than white people?
Who does?
Asian Americans.
Yeah, because Asian Americans
pretty much dispels the idea of white privilege.
Because
white
Asian Americans
isn't real.
Don't trust me. You're talking to an Asian American. Do not throw the model minority trope on me. That's because Asian Americans, one, were banned from immigration until about 1965. Two, didn't suffer genocide at the hands of white supremacists. Three, weren't enslaved for 400 years by white supremacists. So the fact that the immigration policies that were enacted post 1965 allowed primarily, exclusively well-educated, highly educated Asians to selectively come in, and then to point to them and say, look, there's no oppression here. All you're doing is proving the point that you only let in a select few Asians who had, like my father, had a postdoctorate, and that's why he was able to get a work visa to come here in the first place post 1965. The rest of the broader
we need immigrants. I support immigrants. We need legal immigrants and not illegal immigrants.
Okay, but my point is that what you define as illegal immigrants now would define the entire structure of how white people came here in the first place. Do you support deporting all of them and making them come through the legal way now?
Yeah, I support.
Because if so, you should probably self-deport.
I should probably what?
So do you support, if you say you support legal immigration, do you support deporting all the white Europeans who came here through what would now be defined as illegal immigration?
You mean, well, if they're here today, then yes, deport them if they're illegal. But I think you're talking about ancestors who are now dead.
or their children. I mean, because now we're deporting children of undocumented immigrants too. So do you support deporting the
I don't
children?
support ending birthrights. I don't support ending birthright citizenship.
That's not the question I asked. That's not the question I asked. The question that I asked was, if you support so-called legal immigration as it is today, do you also support applying that same standard to all people, or only going forward?
I support, apply the immigration laws to all people. If you're not here legally, you shouldn't be here.
Great. When do you self-deport?
Say it again. When do you self-deport?
Yeah, because you said you support applying the immigration laws to all people. So then when do you self-deport? Because chances are your ancestors came here at a time that would be defined as illegal immigration. So when are you going to self-deport?
Right, but like I said, there's a thing called birthright citizenship. Even if my grandfather was here legally, I would be born here, so I'm legal.
Oh, so you don't support applying the laws to all people. You want to make exceptions. That sounds like an equity argument.
No, that's not exception. That's in the Constitution. Birthright citizenship for everybody.
But that's my point, though. You see how
which is about equity.
Which is literally about equity. Do you understand what equity does for you now?
That's not equity. That's for everybody. That's in the Constitution.
Yes, it guarantees that everyone has an equal chance at the same outcome. That's equity.
Right. That's equality. It's not equity. Equity is communism.
It's not equality. If it was equality, it would just be everybody's a citizen. It's saying if you're born here, you aren't in control of the circumstances of your birth. Therefore, we're going to give you the same opportunities as everybody else that is here. That's equity. It's taking something about your identity that you don't get to control, understanding the intersectional argument, and allowing you equal chance at a good outcome.
That's not
what are we doing?
To me. But
you
said you're a man. Qasim, you said that you're a man, so you have privilege, right? So what is a man?
Male privilege.
Are we back to gender?
Man is male to you. Man is male to you? That's my position.
No. Great, but I'm having difficulty moving on to a new argument until we resolve the first one. I don't do the circular argument nonsense. We need to first acknowledge either equity has a meaning or it doesn't. You can't on one hand say you don't support equity, but then when I give you an example of how equity has benefited you, suddenly say that's no longer equity. Like, words have meanings. And if you want to start debating what the meaning of man and woman is, let's start with equity first, so I know that you actually stick to definitions, then we can go on to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that birthright citizenship is equity, so we're going to have to agree to disagree.
I think what I keep seeing here over and over, there's this old adage when we talk about things like this, that when you are in a position of privilege, equality feels like oppression. And that's what I'm seeing over and over here, is that like what Qasim was trying to get across to you when you interrupted him was that what you're talking about, the equality that you seem to try to be championing here, if you were actually serious about that, you would necessarily want the kind of reparations and the kind of what's the word to say? Go back and fix a thing. I'm just gonna say reparations and leave it at that because I don't know words. Yes. But like you would be supporting these kind of policies, and you would be supporting the kind of intersectional arguments that we're talking about here. You know, in this country, we had 400 years of slavery. Then we had Jim Crow laws. Then when we finally allowed black people to start building some sort of wealth, we burned their cities to the ground. Here in Tulsa, where I'm at, we dropped freaking fire bombs and shot people out of airplanes. Like, we destroyed every bit of black wealth for hundreds of years. And then finally, now, within the last couple of decades, we've said, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps like everybody else did, not acknowledging the fact that white people have benefited from all that trauma. We gave them all of these problems. We took everything they had, enriched ourselves with their suffering, and now we're telling them, just be like us, just be rich, just work harder, just whatever. If you were serious about equality, you would want to level the playing field, and you would say, these people have been put down for so long, they need to be lifted up to the same level that everybody else is at so that they can succeed and start the race at the same point and have the same equal opportunity. But you don't do that because you see these people over here.
Everybody has the same opportunity.
What
opportunities do people not have?
They don't.
What opportunities do they not have? And what opportunities do they lack?
Ted, they fundamentally don't, and this is not an opinion. White
you're
people
talking about on average they have lower income. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, on average they have lower income, because that is true.
That's not what we're saying.
What is it then?
But it's so much beyond that. It's so much beyond that. Look,
generational wealth.
Generational wealth is a big part of it. What Forrest has pointed out, there are numbers that back this up. Fundamentally, numbers that back this up. Right, and if you don't want to talk about the racial divide, let's talk about the gender divide, right? Women couldn't get a credit card on their own, couldn't get any financial credit until 1974. 200 years after the country was established, the country finally decided, you know what, maybe women are intelligent beings, and we should make sure they have
it's access. 2025 now. That's the thing. It's 2025. You guys always want to go back to the past, and that's what wokeness really is. It's just obsessing over all the problems
from that time till today. So help me. I think with the problem that you're not able to define for us is, when did that justice happen? When did that equality happen? Because you had 200 years as a head start as a man over women in this country. So you're telling me that just because a law was passed, if I come and I break your house every year for 200 years, and meanwhile I'm building my house bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then after 200 years, I say, okay, I'm just going to stop destroying your house, but now I've built my house for 200 years, and then I say, why isn't your house as big as mine? You clearly have the chance to do so. Do you not see the 200-year head start as a problem? Do you see that that's just like no big deal?
Here's the problem with that analogy, is it looks at it as two buckets of people, like white people and black people. But like you said, it's individuals. So there's poor white people.
Because that's the way it has been for a long time.
And there's very rich black people. Right? So
America literally invented the concept of race as it is today in order to make that reality happen, Ted.
Why would you apply it based on the whole group when you admitted that there are black people who are very rich and there are white people who are very poor?
Ted, this is the problem. What you're running into here over and over and over and over is just these like throwaway talking points that are used to dismiss any kind of serious critical thinking about this. What Qasim just laid out to you is a really simple analogy, right? If my great-grandpa steals from your great-grandpa and leaves them completely destitute, and then my grandpa steals from your grandpa and leaves them completely destitute, and then my dad steals from your dad and leaves them completely destitute, and now I, enriched by 4 generations of stolen wealth, am sitting on a throne of gold, and I look down at you in poverty and I say, just work harder. It makes me an asshole. It doesn't make any sense to say, well, we should just try to work together. And if you do manage to succeed and you do manage to pull yourself up and you do manage to become wealthy, it doesn't make any sense for me to then say, see, everything that happened in the past doesn't matter because you were able to make it anyway. You were still dealt a serious injustice before you were even born. And that still mattered to you, and that still impacted your life and changed your financial outcome. As hard as you worked, you could have been farther along. So that's what we're talking about. When we talk about the past, we're not just deflecting to some shit that we don't, that's easier to talk about. It still matters today. Those scars are still weeping.
Right. Okay. So here's the problem. What you're saying is actually pretty true, right? There's a lot of goodness in that, and that we should work to fight injustice. The problem is it's not practical. So how are you going to distribute reparations when, everybody's pretty much mixed now? There's really no purity.
Is your
total made up thing by racists?
I'm just gonna stop here for just a second and just clarify. Is your actual, maybe you don't want to, is the actual point that you want to make right now, yes, I acknowledge there is great injustice, but it's just impractical to solve it? Is that really where you want this conversation to go? Is that the hill you want to die on?
I don't think it's impractical to solve it. I think it's impractical to do reparations, specifically what you guys were talking about.
Do you think that we can completely fix this problem, that we can completely 100% make it right and just make this totally normal, and we have now completely enacted justice for every person who has had any kind of historical oppression, do you think it's possible to just completely make it right in any way?
See, the thing is, all over the world,
That was a
there's
yes or no
history of
question.
death and
That was a yes or no
destruction.
question.
So no.
That was a yes or no
No, I don't
question.
think so.
No.
All
Yes.
of human history is a story of hatred and oppression
Ted-
and injustice and atrocity.
Right.
It's not
And
you.
Ted,
It's not just
I
America.
agree.
It's everywhere.
Ted, I agree. I agree with you. I don't think there's a way to fix it. And I do think that human history is largely, a story of oppression. I agree. But do you think we could try to make it a little bit better?
Of course, and I support doing that kind of stuff, but
Right.
not reparations,
And congratulations,
not preferential
Ted.
hiring.
That means you're fucking woke.
No, I don't agree with reparations, affirmative action, preferential hiring, that kind of stuff. I support uplifting
we're
people
right.
through communities
I know,
on an
but
individual
Ted,
basis.
And we're right back to
Being
this.
colorblind.
Here's the thing.
Colorblind
You
is the
actually
way
fucking
forward.
said the word colorblind.
Ted, it's really irrelevant that you don't. Ted, here's the thing. It's actually irrelevant that you don't support affirmative action, or it's actually irrelevant. The point that Forrest made shows you already agree with us that there is injustice, and we should try to make it less unjust. We agree on that. How we do that, we can figure that out. But and we can disagree on what the best way to do that is. But the point.
Okay, so let's move on now.
No. We can't move on until we
You guys have made your
certify
points.
the point.
I'll even concede. I'll even say I concede. All right, so we'll move on. I was wrong. Can we
Right.
just move
You
on?
concede
So,
that there is historical injustice and that we should work and take affirmative actions
so
to stop that
I
historical
want to ask,
injustice.
because the point of this call is about Trump. So, what do you guys support illegal immigration?
Define illegal immigration for me.
Breaking the U.S. immigration laws, crossing the borders illegally,
Okay.
What is
or overstaying your visa.
No, I want to just 1 second, because I've practiced immigration law for quite some time. So where do you define as crossing the border illegally?
Crossing the U.S. borders without permission, without being in the bounds of the law, overstaying your visa, violating any of the immigration law.
And so those who follow the rules, those who abide by the laws, you support them being here indefinitely without any issue, correct?
Yeah, I support legal immigration. Like I said, we were founded on immigrants. We need immigrants. We need smart, good immigrants to come over legally.
So I think at this point, I'm going to ask you to show me at any point in history when this definition that you've defined has applied to the tens of millions of white Europeans who came in, because you won't find a moment in history where that happened. And in reality,
so once
the
again,
immigration law,
you guys want to go back into the past. We're focusing on Trump's presidency, which is 2025.
Right. And so just let me finish my point.
Stop going into the past. Let's focus on today.
He's
you
not.
guys support.
He's not. It
you guys
sounds
support
like he
illegal
is when you don't
immigration
think
today.
about it, but he's not.
Ted, you got to let me finish the point, and then you'll understand that I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about right now. Because right now, what Trump is defining as quote-unquote illegal immigration is an arbitrary standard that he's literally made up over the last few years to make it more difficult for Black and brown people to immigrate. This is a guy who just in the last month opened the doors for alleged white genocide victims from South Africa, a made-up term that doesn't exist, while blocking 1,600 vetted Afghan refugees who did everything right, exactly as they were supposed to do, followed the letter of the law, were approved by the U.S. State Department as legal documented immigrants. And he said, you know what? No, the hell with that. You're illegal. He asked the Supreme Court to take 500,000 Venezuelan and Cuban and El Salvadorian immigrants who are documented, who did everything right, and say, no, make them illegal. And Supreme Court agreed. This is happening in real time right now. Documented legal immigrants who cross the border legally with a visa, with permission, the way they were supposed to, and he just made them illegal. So the point I'm trying to make is your definition of legal immigration is not a legal or consistent standard. is Trump literally making stuff up based off of the color of someone's skin. That's why it's fascism. That's why it's white supremacy. And that's why I'm confused why you support that when you claim you support equality.
No, so I can even say that I don't support everything Trump does. I don't think he's perfect. I think the South Africa refugee thing was definitely unfair, and yeah, it definitely seemed a little bit racist. But
A little bit.
Biden, on the other hand, had a totally open border, so that's just pretty much indefensible to just not enforce the border.
Well,
ignoring the fact that. Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you'll be shocked to know, Ted, that if you look at the data on who deported more people, Biden deported more people than did Donald Trump. And if you listened to immigration rights advocates, we were screaming at Biden that this is unjust. What are you doing? Stop this nonsense.
I don't think it was. I think Obama did. I think I'd push back. I don't think it was Biden that deported more, but I do believe Obama deported more.
It was definitely Biden more as well.
It was both of them, as a matter of fact. I think Obama had like more deportations than like any president in history or some shit like that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing, Ted.
But
is
the
that
border
like
crossings are down record.
What you just said is obviously and demonstrably untrue. But what I think is more important is that if you're talking about how you support Trump, trying to secure the border and get all these illegal immigrants out of here, but you support legal immigration, you support people following the rules, then why the hell is ICE arresting people at their immigration hearings when they go to court to do things properly? Why is ICE waiting outside to arrest them? Why are we doing that right now?
Again, I'm not going to say I support everything Trump's doing, everything ICE is doing, but I'm going to say that Biden was neglecting the border laws. There was true neglect, and that was the problem.
But here's the thing, man, is that Trump is saying that he is going to shut down the border and he's going to stop all these illegal immigrants. What he is doing is actually just rounding up brown people. So what you seem to be doing here is you're saying, well, Trump has these ideas and the words he's saying, the things that I heard on Fox News that Trump said, and that's all you've got. What Qasim and I are actually showing you is his actual track record. And what his actual track record shows is if you're white, you can stay.
Yeah, the actual track record shows that there are dangerous immigrants. There truly are. This guy in Colorado who threw the Molotov cocktail.
Actually,
do you mean the dangerous immigrants like the fucking cartel members that he just brought in, or like what?
Yeah, I mean the guy that threw the Molotov cocktail was pretty bad, and he was an illegal immigrant. I think he overstayed a visa.
Okay. So first of all, let's be clear that overstaying a visa is the same thing as a parking ticket. It's a civil violation. It's not a felony, first of all. Second of all, 2 points I want to bring up. It's
violating immigration law.
Okay, so is speeding. So we should deport you for that too, I guess. 2 things I want to point out. 1, 150-year study by Northwestern University looked at crime rates from citizens, from immigrants, and from undocumented immigrants. And there has never been a point in the last 150 years where undocumented immigrants or immigrants ever had a higher crime rate or violent crime rate than U.S. citizens. By far, the most violent demographic in American history has always been U.S. citizens. 1. 2.
Specifically white dudes.
Exactly right. 2.
That's not true in England. Did you know England migrants?
Oh my God, are we living in England right now? My bad. Forrest, I thought we were living
England
in the United
We
States.
were talking about Trump in America.
I get confused.
England is facing a serious migrant crisis.
I need you to help me out with the second part. I really need your help on the second part. Whenever we bring up something in the past, you're like, hey, stop living in the past. We're talking about the here and now. And now we're talking about Trump and his fascist policies and his arbitrary immigration policies. And you say, but Biden, but Biden, but Biden. Why do you keep bringing up the past? But when we bring up the past, it's something wrong. Help me understand. What are we missing?
Because this call is about whether I support Trump or not. And part of why I say he has good ideas is because he's doing better than Biden. That's why.
Biden isn't running. But like, I'm sorry,
he was running.
That's the thing. That's what gets me is that like we're saying, hey, Trump's a dick, and your thing is, yeah, but Biden. I don't support Biden either. I didn't like Biden. Yeah. I'm not a Biden fan. Fuck Biden. Yeah. But also fuck Donald Trump, and fuck Donald Trump objectively more.
I would agree with you, actually. I wouldn't say more, but I would say they're both bad. I don't think any of them are good.
Also, Ted, are you bringing up Biden because you're admitting that things that happened in the past affect things happening right now?
Ooh, girl.
Again, I'm bringing up Biden because he was the alternative to Trump until Harris took over.
Got it. And so the things that he did affect what's happening right now. Is that the point you're making?
No, I'm using it as a comparison to show that Trump's policies are preferable to the previous ones, and that's why I support what he's doing.
So it's preferable to arbitrarily change immigration law based on what Trump wants? Because guess what? There's about 600,000
immigration law.
There's about 600,000 undocumented white, Canadian, and European immigrants. When was the last time you saw ICE raid a predominantly white school?
We should deport them. There was a guy I saw on the news, a Dutch guy. He was really white, and he was deported. So they should keep doing that.
The one guy.
One guy.
Found it. No, but you haven't
Omar Garcia, the guy who was charged with human trafficking.
Ted, you haven't actually explained. You keep avoiding my simple question. It's a very simple question I'm asking you. The question I'm asking you is, how do you define what's legal and illegal when I gave you multiple examples of legal documented immigrants that Trump is arbitrarily now changing and making them illegal after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I have to look that up.
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Also, I love that you threw in there that Omar Garcia was involved in human trafficking at the end, which is the new thing that the press secretary just kind of threw out there. He was deported on a clerical error, and Trump admitted that it was a mistake and that he was innocent and he shouldn't have been deported. And then they just started saying he was a criminal. And like, that's the thing.
No, they said he was illegal back in like 2019. It wasn't. So the judge said he was illegal back in 2019. And then they had
But here's what I think is so important.
Said, okay,
here's what I think is so important, Ted, is that even if he was an illegal immigrant, even if he was a domestic abuser and a human trafficker and a drug pusher and a gang member, and even if he was just the worst of the worst of the worst, right? Do you know what should have happened to him? He should have gotten due process, which is guaranteed to everyone in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Trump should have brought him back. The Supreme Court said that.
And yet, Donald Trump has said that we can't give these people due process because that would take too much time, which rings very much in the same note as what you said earlier about how, yes, we should try to have some sort of racial justice, but that's complicated. I think I see the trend here where it's just, if it's easy, then you're into it. But like, if it's not easy.
The gender transition for minors, and do you support males playing in women's sports?
Now we're on to the next thing.
That's a big thing Trump's doing. It's been a big focus.
Yeah, no, he's been really staunchly anti-science in both of his administrations, in both of his terms. So like, I'm not surprised whatsoever about this. I would love to dig into it a little bit. I'm actually a biologist. I would love to talk about, sex and gender with you for a moment. I just want to make sure that it's not just going to be the next pivot that we jump onto this next thing to avoid having a difficult conversation that you don't want to have.
I mean, I feel like you guys have made good points, and I'm just trying to go over everything I think about Trump that he's doing that's good.
Sure.
So yeah,
Trump. Yes, Trump is very much anti-trans and really kind of anti-LGBT in general. Because he is anti.
I'm pro-LGBT.
Okay. The thing is, he is anti-trans for the same reason that he's also anti-climate change, and the same reason that he's against like the park service and all sorts of other things, and like going off against national park. He's just anti-science. He doesn't understand science. He doesn't care about science. He cares about his parochial worldview and the way things were when he was a child and what he's seen on television, and that's how he's legislating. The fact that he literally, one of the first things he said when he was elected, or when he was sworn in, was that America recognizes two genders, male and female, and they are determined at conception, not even just at birth. That is an incredibly anti-science, ignorant-ass position.
It's pro-science. That's not ignorant. You are ignorant.
So
male and female are determined at conception.
So let's dig into it really quick. Do you understand that sex and gender are different things?
Yeah, so I don't believe gender exists. I believe there are two sexes, zero genders, and infinite personalities.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense at all. But like, we'll fine, just whatever. We'll just jump into it. You said sex is determined at conception. What the hell does that mean?
Yep.
Because the way that Trump defined it, I almost guarantee is not the way that you're about to define it.
So Trump defined it by gametes, belonging to the sex
Right.
that produces the small gamete or the large gamete. So if you're
At
male,
conception.
you are belonging to the sex that. It doesn't mean you produce the gamete at conception. It means you belong to the sex that produces that gamete. So if you're male, you do
Right.
belong to the sex that produces the small gamete.
Okay. And so is that how you're going to define sex, is by gamete production?
By belonging to the sex that produces the gametes. So that's why an infertile male is still male.
Okay.
Infertile female is
Okay,
still
so
female.
then gamete production isn't actually how we define sex. It's belonging to. So how do you determine who belongs to that sex?
Through chromosomes.
Chromosomes. Okay, so what chromosomes are we talking about?
XX female, XY male, and then there are the disorders of sexual development, often called intersex, which are not third sexes. They're just disorders of each one.
Nobody
male or
said
female.
they are. Nobody said they are.
A lot of people do.
So-
I didn't say you guys did, but a lot of people do.
Okay, well, nobody serious
So, like,
says they are, I guess.
Klinefelter's-
But like,
Klinefelter's is still male, right? Somebody who has XXY, that's not a third option. That's just a male with a defect.
so let's dig into a different intersex condition then. Let's talk about maybe either De La Chapelle syndrome or Swyer syndrome. I'll start with Swyer because I think it's more interesting personally. Swyer syndrome is also known as XY female syndrome. You have XY allosomes, and yet you develop anatomically as a female. And there are case studies of women with Swyer syndrome getting pregnant and giving birth. So if we're determining this not by gamete size, but by chromosomes, then either we need to say that these are men that can give birth, or we need to say that some women have XY chromosomes, therefore chromosomes alone are not enough to determine sex. Which one is it?
Yeah, I'd have to look into that, but I will concede that there is some complexity to sex.
Right.
However,
so
that doesn't mean that a full male who identifies as a full female should be in women's sports.
So again, this is why
male.
sex and gender are different things. We'll talk about why here in a little bit if we have time for it. The thing is, when we talk about this stuff, you're right. There are a lot of complexities to sex. Sex is a multivariate system with lots of different pieces that go into it. No single one piece is solely determinant of the outcome, and no single one piece has only two options. And so what you end up with is a sex spectrum, a bimodal distribution of sexual characteristics upon which most of us fall pretty close to the poles, but a lot of us don't. Like we're talking about tens of hundreds of millions of people here that don't fall close to the poles in these simple binary categories. And so what Trump is saying with this, like I said, anti-science rhetoric of you're either XX or XY, you either produce sperm or eggs, you're either male or female, and that's all there is. He is erasing the existence of not just trans people, but also intersex people and also non-binary people. He is erasing the existence of hundreds of millions of people around the world, let alone just the people here in the United States. And also, might I add, when you said that I am ignorant for singularity, he is also going against the academic consensus in biology, in psychology, in oh gosh, the word that I was looking for just flew out of my freaking brain, and that's fine. Anthropology, the thing that I have a fucking master's degree in. Yes, he is going against the academic consensus of actual scientists who study this shit. My first master's was in anthropology. My second master's was in biomedical sciences. At no point did any of my professors, textbooks, research studies, anything come up with anything even remotely close to the ignorant shit that Trump is saying, because anybody who understands the very basics of this stuff can tell why it's dumb. So Trump is just saying these simple, reductionist, stupid things that he heard on TV somebody else say, and a bunch of people who aren't biologists are nodding along with them because they don't understand this stuff. He's playing to your ignorance and your fear, and that sucks. And I can tell Ted doesn't care because Ted just hung up. So, fuck, man.
There you go. There you go. I mean, By the way, I enjoyed that part immensely. I'm not a scientist. I just love hearing scientists talk about this kind of stuff. So I know when to shut up and to stay in my lane, but I appreciate that.
Oh.
But look, I think for those listening, the takeaway in that conversation with Ted is it's wild how he equates the solution with refusing to acknowledge the problem. Like, and he acknowledged the problem. He's like, yeah, I agree there's injustice and we should do something. And that was a great question you asked for us. Can we do something to make it better? And he goes, yes, great. Argument's over. Mm-hmm. You agree that intersectionality matters. You agree with wokeness, even though you define it pejoratively. You can have differences of opinion on how to solve those problems, and that's fine. There's many ways to solve problems, but that's not the debate we're having. The debate we're having is whether inequality and injustice exists, and I'm glad we're on the same page.
Right. It's so stupid that this is where we have to go with that, but oh my glob. It is frustrating that we have to go through this again and again and again and remind people that, like, if we're talking about just intersex people, that's 136 million people. You know what I mean? Like that don't fit into these neat little boxes. And even the people that you think fit in the boxes, I guarantee most of them fucking don't. What I wasn't going to dig into with Ted, because holy shit, it would have been a whole other 10-minute or a 30-minute conversation, is that, like, anatomical sex is different than, like, phenotypic sex or gonadal sex or hormonal sex or chromosomal sex or genetic sex. These are all different levels of this. And this is a big reason why sex and gender are different things, because gender varies across cultures, across generations, from person to person, from day to day. We see variations in gender. And I guarantee Ted would have agreed with that if he actually logicked it out, rather than just sticking to the talking points that he tried to jump to. And by the way, you not talking when I'm talking science is exactly how I felt when you were talking about, like, the history of oppression across women and black people. I was like, yeah, dude, yeah.
I appreciate the partnership. I wanted to take a much pettier route than you, Forrest. I wanted to say, hey, since you care so much about women's sports, can you name me 5 professional female athletes and just watch them crickets? Because that's always the response. It's just crickets, but they don't actually care. And someone, I don't know who tweeted it, but somebody had a brilliant tweet of how are women? How is it we can't have the same people who care about women's sports will tell you that we have to kick trans men out of the military because they're not strong enough. Like, well, which one is it? Are they super freak athletes or just not strong enough soldiers? Like, what's that fine line that you're trying to pinpoint there as well?
It's so funny. It's so funny. Oh, man. We've got a few other callers here on the line. Before we move on, was there anything that you felt like we didn't really get to touch on that you wanted to dig in? Anything that, like, you wanted to cover a little bit more? Because, like, holy shit, that was a fire hose of insanity.
No, I think there's a perception that some folks on the right have that people of color, black people first, Native American people of color broadly, want to blame white people for the problems of yesteryear. And that's not the case. It's not about blaming white people today for the problems. It's asking white people to use their privilege and power and platforms to dismantle those perpetual systems of oppression and rebuild systems of equity and equality. That's where we want partnership and allyship. And there's a big difference between saying, hey, Forrest, you're responsible for the Tulsa Race Massacre 105 years ago before you were born, versus saying, hey, can we partner together and work on demanding reparations for black people because it's the basic right and humane thing to do. Two very different things. The first one you have no control over. The second one you absolutely have control over. And that's where the accountability aspect of it comes in.
Yeah, that I think that's so important, because, like, it seems like the rhetoric is always like, oh, you want me to be ashamed of my race. You want to make kids feel bad for being white and all that. It's like, no, I don't. I'm not ashamed to be white, but I do feel shitty about, like, what white people have done, and I'm going to adjust my behavior accordingly. There's certain words I'm not going to say. There's certain jokes I'm not going to make. There's certain, microaggressions I'm going to try to be aware of, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It's not my fault that this is the case, but it is my problem because it's their problem. And I live in this world with them. And, like, I don't get how fragile ass white folks don't understand, yes, these people, they've experienced historical injustice. If you meet a black person today, good chance their parents or grandparents remember a time when they couldn't use a certain toilet or drink from a certain water, and that passes down to them. They have this problem. They have this trauma. They have this unique experience that affects them. but it's not my fault, so I should be able to be a dick, right? Just fuck. How hard is it to be just cool? Yeah. Just be cool. Yeah. Like how hard is
empathy, right? Empathy is very underrated. Like we need just to have basic empathy for humanity. I remember saying this to somebody that like when I condemn white supremacy and you say, hey, I feel attacked, you're telling on yourself. Like this is not a very complicated thing. Like when somebody condemns like the Taliban, I'm not like, how dare you attack me? I'm like, yeah, I condemn the Taliban as well. This is not a complicated thing. And in the history of America, some white people were enslavers and other white people were abolitionists. When we talk about the history of oppression, if you get offended, then you're telling us you identify more with the enslavers than with the abolitionists, and you need to deconstruct why that is. And maybe going to therapy is a good starting point there.
That's great. Take that up with yourself. We've got 4 calls left, and we're going to close the lines here. So our 4 calls, please, don't, unless you really want to, you guys will be our last ones. And that was because we were trying to make this a 2-ish hour show, and we're already an hour and 15 minutes in. So we're gonna go through some calls here and see who says what. Let's start with I may be mispronouncing this, so please tell me. Alon. It may be Alon. Let me know. I don't want to mispronounce your name. I'm not trying to be a jerk. Calling in from Capybara Airlines. Radical. Who says that the Columbia student should have gone to jail. Alon, please tell me how to pronounce your name. And also, hi, welcome to the line.
Hi, how you doing? Alon is fine. Whatever comfortable for you.
Right on. So you're talking about the Columbia student.
Yeah, but I'm from California, not from Capybara.
Oh, I don't know how anyone could have known that. So you're talking about the Columbia student. You're talking about Mahmoud Khalil, right?
Yeah, Mahmoud, whatever. You said that he was exercising his First Amendment?
Yes, he was protesting. I believe he was protesting against the genocide in Palestine, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so how he was exercising his First Amendment, exactly?
He was protesting. He was organizing peaceful protests on the university campus where he was a student paying tuition at that university.
So it was peaceful, that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it was peaceful at all. I saw a lot of videos how they didn't let Jews inside. They were violent. They were calling for genocide. I don't know how it was peaceful.
So they were protesting against genocide. Really quick, Alon, are you driving right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you pull over for me? It's unethical for us to have a conversation with somebody who's driving because you're distracted.
Unfortunately, I'm in a hurry. I cannot pull over.
Okay, well then I apologize to you. We can't continue with the call. Then it's not right for us to do so. But we will talk about it. We're not going to ignore what you're saying. Just stay tuned into the show, and we'll talk a little bit about
Can I just say one sentence? One sentence?
Sure.
He was calling for genocide because when you say in Free Palestine, it's calling for genocide of 10 million Israel.
Okay, that makes no fucking sense. We're going to talk about why, but definitely call back sometime when you're not driving. We're going to talk about that now. Bye-bye. It's an ethical line for us because we can't have somebody being distracted while they're driving and getting in a wreck. So no, that's not what that is at all. If that was what that meant, if you're seriously going to say that saying that Palestine should be free is the same thing as saying that Israel should be eradicated, then also it must mean that saying that Israel should exist is saying that Palestine should be eradicated, right? Or does that not make any fucking sense because you have a working brain, right? So no, freedom is not genocide. What's happening to the Palestinians is genocide. And saying that you want the genocide against them to end is not saying you want genocide to happen to anybody else. Qasim, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, well said. And his whole claim about, well, I saw videos of violence, and I saw, well, okay, that's what due process of law is supposed to entail. That's the whole point of what separates us from a tyrannical rule where a king can say, Forrest, I don't like that shirt you're wearing, and therefore you're going to prison forever. It's nonsense. Mm-hmm. And so if the government had any actual evidence of violence, of breaking the the laws that allow for peaceful dissent and peaceful protest and petition of government and petition of those in power, then they should have presented that to a judge, gotten a warrant, presented to a grand jury, gotten an indictment, and then arrested him and processed him through due process of law. You don't do that when I say do that is you don't kidnap somebody when you have evidence. You kidnap somebody when you don't have evidence, when you are advancing this fascist regime. And so whatever evidence this guy claims exists, it's already debunked by the fact that the government still, 4 months later, hasn't been able to produce a single shred of it and hasn't been able to provide it whatsoever. That's how you know this is concocted and fabricated. There is, especially in a 2025 America, with all the surveillance that we have and all the evidence and all the access that we have, if Mahmoud Khalil had done something illegal or wrong, it would be on the front page of every newspaper. The fact is that he did nothing wrong. He exercised his First Amendment right. And all those free speech warriors out there who claim about standing for our constitutional principles are full of crap by being silent about this, because this is the time to speak up. And the fact that they're not willing to speak up shows that they aren't actually interested in protecting our constitutional republic. They're actually interested in advancing a sense of autocracy and fascism. And that should scare the hell out of anybody committed to basic justice.
Two really important things. Number one, Rob Tabo, I don't know. We're not taking any more calls. Otherwise, I would say call the fuck in. But the person who just in the comments had to be, in the chat here, had to be muted for saying, and vice versa, douchebag. If you're for the government of either place, you're pro-genocide. They both suck. If you care about people, we need to not support their governments. Dipshit. We're being against genocide. We are not pro either government. We're saying that we shouldn't be eradicating Palestinians. You are not pro-Hamas if you say that 54,000 people, mainly women and children, being bombed into oblivion isn't justice. We're advocating against the starvation of 2 million people. We're not advocating for the government of Palestine. We're saying that you shouldn't be slaughtering innocent civilians. That's what we're talking about here. I cannot imagine what kind of mental gymnastics you have to still be doing. What are we now? Almost 3 years now into this fucking situation, and you're still not able to separate pro-Palestinian, anti-genocide with pro-Hamas and pro-terrorism. And just fucking think for 1 second about what you're saying. Good gravy. Second thing that's really important is that this person was talking about, how this protester was calling for genocide. Okay, what about the protesters that are actually calling for genocide? Like, I don't know, the Nazis that are not being treated this way. We have Nazi protests going up and down the street. We have Proud Boys going up and down the street. We have actual white supremacist organizations that are marching in this country all the fucking time, flying swastika flags and calling for genocide. And you know what doesn't happen to them? They don't get black bagged off the street. And they don't get indefinitely detained while the government looks for evidence. They don't do that shit. They get due process, which is a fucking thing in the Constitution that some reason, no Trump supporter seems to understand anymore. So, like, even if Mahmoud Khalil was out there saying heinous, racist, evil, bigoted, just terrible genocidal shit, if he was doing that, he's an asshole and he deserves due process. Sorry. I don't know how we can get this across.
Very simple. It's honestly very simple. And due process, by the way, applies whether you're a citizen or not, whether you're documented or not. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled. And by the way, the first time the Supreme Court ruled this was in the 19th century. It was an all-white male, mostly white supremacist Supreme Court. For them to still recognize that every person in this country has basic due process of law, because the Fifth Amendment says no person shall be denied. No person, not to say citizen, doesn't say documented, it says no person. If a white supremacist can get it, I promise you can get it as well, unless you're somehow dumber or worse than a white supremacist, which is, again, go to therapy because you might need it.
It's hard to do. Yeah. To be dumber than a white supremacist is, you need to be watered a couple times a week. So we've got Brett, pronouns he, him, calling in from iridescent legumes. Talking about shiny beans up in here. I don't know. That's what it says. Who's a theist who wants to know if we should just have open borders? Which honestly, I'm kind of down with. Brett, you're on the line with Qasim and Forrest. How you doing today?
Hey, what's up? I don't know why you wrote all that. It's Chicago. It's just Chicago. I don't know why I put all that.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how anybody could have possibly known.
Well, that's what he asked. That's what I told him. There's a lot that y'all been going through. So yeah, I started with the borders thing because I thought that was a conversation at first, but I guess the question is, trying to think what would be like the start of something. I guess first of all, like, what is, you said like, oh, fuck Trump, fuck Biden. Like, I guess like, who is a president that governed the United States of America like the way your ideology sort of demands a nation be governed? Like, which president would be that president so far that we've had?
We haven't had one for me. Qasim, do you have a?
Okay.
I mean, there've been bright spots, I think, right? I mean, you talk about the New Deal, you talk about Truman. I think JFK had promise before he got assassinated. I mean, there's been bright spots here and there. And look, I can't, say that every president was horrible or more bad than good. I think Carter had some great contributions to society and to humanity. I think where we are now is, because there's so much corporate money in politics and so much corporate influence in politics, average folks like us have little to no say. There's a really telling study done by Princeton University that looked at the correlation and the causation of popularity of an idea versus the likelihood of it being passed. And what it found was that if an idea had very low popularity, it had about a 33% chance of becoming law. If it had very high popularity, it had about a 33% chance of becoming law. The one X factor was when it had popularity among the top 1%. Then it had about a 66 to 70% chance of becoming law. And so I think that's where people are really fed up. And in the last cycle, I think one of the reasons people stayed home for Harris, there's a number of reasons. So I don't want this to be, taken out of context as the one reason. But one of the reasons was people were frustrated with the Democratic Party saying one thing and doing another. There was a viral post made by the Democratic Party calling out Trump, rightfully so, might I add, for being funded by billionaires. And then someone responded with a more viral post listing out all the billionaires supporting the Harris campaign. And there were more billionaires supporting the Harris campaign than the Trump campaign. And so on one hand, they're rightfully calling out Trump for being owned by billionaires. But then how do you explain the fact that even more billionaires are donating exorbitant amount of funds to you as well? And so for me, the broader question, Brett, my neighbor here in Illinois, is we need to have a nation that is, back to the basics of by, of, and for the people. Get corporate money out of politics. Get this unlimited Citizens United spending out of politics. Get rid of these lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. Enact term limits on the congressional level, on the state level. We have it on the presidential level because we recognize that awesome power should have limits. We need to apply that everywhere else as well. And that, I think, begins on the local level. I encourage folks to get involved locally, aggressively on the local level. But it's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be a long battle. And, maybe Forrest disagrees with this part, but maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Forrest. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. I think what we're seeing now is a really crappy situation, and I think it's going to get worse, unfortunately.
No, I definitely do agree with that. And Brett, to be perfectly honest with you, like I do appreciate the question. I'm not the right person to ask for two reasons. Number one, I'm not an historian would be the phrasing on that. I don't know the histories. I'm a biologist. It's just not my area of expertise. So like there would be a lot that I don't know. Also, genuinely, I am so fucking far left. It's silly how left I am. And so like there is no way that any part of this country in any of its history, whether I understand it very well or not, could possibly meet my moral standard. As Qasim mentioned a little while ago, this country was founded on the genocide of one population and the enslavement of another population, and we have never corrected for that. We have continued to benefit from that. And so there is no president in history that has really done anything significant, in my opinion, to get us off of that track. Even Lincoln with the Emancipation Proclamation, also said that if he could end the Civil War without freeing a single slave, he absolutely would have done so. Teddy Roosevelt. I love Teddy Roosevelt with the whole parks and clean food and drugs and all these different things. Love that shit. Also said that the only good Indian is a dead Indian. I liked Obama pretty well. I loved the Affordable Care Act. I liked the attempts at like racial and gendered equality. Also was like Lord of all drone strikes. And so like at the end of the day, like we really haven't had a guy, and they have all been fucking guys that I just have really enjoyed, or that I can say weren't guilty of some heinous fucking crimes and deserve to be held accountable. This country, as I think also Qasim mentioned earlier on, this country has historically been so fascistic and so oppressive that it was a template for the Nazis. Literally, Henry Ford is mentioned by name in Mein Kampf for the way he ran his companies and shit. And we still hail that dude as a hero in this country, and we still look to that kind of model as how things should be run. So I just don't like it. And on top of all of it, we have, you can just buy elections now. You can, if you have enough money, you can go buy a politician, you can buy a vote, you can buy a bill. In my field, in biology, we have a word for that. We call it corruption. But I guess in America, we're cool with it. So I'm not a fan of literally anything in this country, because I think it could be so much better. Even the parts I like, I'm like, it could be so much better. I think personally that we are only as free as our tightest prison door, and we are only as rich as the poorest person in this country, and we are only as tall as united we stand together. And right now we are failing in those things. If any country, any nation in the world allows its people to struggle for basic necessities of food, water, shelter, healthcare, I think that country's failing. But again, can't stress it enough. I am very quixotic and deeply recalcitrant and should not be taken as like a moral bar here.
Okay, yeah, so just a couple things. I don't need to reply to these, but just two things I wanted to mention. One, I actually don't think Harris lost for the reasons he's saying. I think she lost because she was black and a woman, and we live in the country we live in, and so there's enough racist and sexist people. That's my opinion. I thought she did amazing considering the pressure she was under. So as I've been, the other thing I wanted to say, just again, I don't need to reply, but he was citing like statistics and from Princeton, and I do think we're all on this other side of the phone, like we have no platforms, but you guys do, and I really do think all these YouTubers I watch, and whether right or the left, I mean, they spend all day and all night citing all these statistics, all these like, oh, look at all these inventions, look at all these discoveries, look at all these. All of those things came from universities. And I feel like there's very, like, just not nearly enough people, especially the very large platforms, these science platforms, they're doing very little to actually talk about that, about how we have all that we have. It's because of universities. And I just feel like, to me, that's where I look at a MAGA as being kind of a, I don't want to like mess up your YouTubiness, but like a domestic tea, is because to me that is no foreign government could do more damage to the future of America and the now than what they're doing to universities and undermining medicine, undermining science, and sending away the global population that I forget who said it, but basically gave America the cheat code to have all these advancements, because we got all the global best coming to America to study because of our freedoms and because of all the things that we afforded them. And that infrastructure, okay, we create our PhDs at the universities, and those PhDs essentially are that they have the reason that the government goes to universities so that we can create the PhDs, and they have the infrastructure because they're a teaching institution, so they can build all the infrastructure we need so that they can teach people, and then that's how all these corporations can take that information, they splice it this way and that, and they package it and they sell it to us. But it starts at universities. I don't care if it's Einstein, Oppenheimer, everything. Einstein, like, I think it's 100% of everything Einstein did was publicly funded research. So I just want that. I just feel like more could be done to put that out there. And again, I don't need to reply. This is just so I wanted to get back to sort of the question, but I just wanted to say that as whether that was appropriate or not, but I just wanted to say that.
No, I largely agree. That like there's a reason why Trump loves the poorly educated. Because when you talk about it, it's you have to be very careful because you don't want to come across as elitist. But like the anti-intellectualism is the fire in which fascism is forged. If you can convince people that all the experts are wrong and expertise is untrustworthy, and that only this government official is the only source of truth, then getting into dictatorship is a walk in the park. All they have to do is tell you what the truth is, and you believe it. You see that when you listen to MAGA cultists who will hear Trump say something just truly fucking reprehensible and stupid and say he didn't say that. Okay, well, he did say that, but he didn't mean that. Okay, well, he did mean that, but you're taking it the wrong way. Okay, you're taking it exactly the way he said, but Biden did something worse, and on and on and on and on and on. And so just and you see also with Vance recently, a couple of weeks ago, putting out about how the professors in the universities are like these arbiters of truth, that they need to be stopped because they're the ones telling us what truth is, and we should be able to decide for ourselves. And if you're convincing people that getting an education is paramount to wokeness and whatever else, and that you go to university to become more liberal, which is another thing that I hear all the time, or brainwashed or indoctrinated or whatever, and that one man's gut feeling is just as good as another man's actual academic expertise, you're going to end up with a population that is very, very, very easy to control.
Well, liberalism, again, I don't want to, but conservatism is it's an ideology of fear. It's in the name. It's conservative. It's make America great again just means essentially like last known good. That's the whole. But everybody conflates greatness in a way that it shouldn't be conflated. It doesn't mean like an elevation of good. That's not what we mean when we say great nations. It means influence. But anyway. But so as it pertains to to me, when you say like fuck Trump, fuck Biden, oh yeah, fuck him, fuck that. To me, it's hard for me not to hear fuck America. But more importantly, you're like, well, I'm this, I'm leftist, I'm this, I'm that, and these are my morals and my principles. But I think that I wouldn't mind you and I know it's hard, like you have to have a position that has to be held in a certain regard that has to be on some level inflexible. But, and I know that isn't what you believe because you're a scientist, et cetera, but like just the notion of this, to me, the issue with wokeness is this issue of what you're framing. Like, well, I am more moral than any president who's ever governed, ergo, they don't meet my moral standard. But I would ask you to sort of take that principle and say, okay, Forrest, who is a person who is more moral than you? And then ask that person, who is the person that is more moral than you? At some point, to me, there has to be a barometer of giving grace to trying. Like I don't think this, whatever ideology you're functioning under, I'm not sure where your atheism drove you, but to me, I don't consider, I consider the drive of trying to really, really matter. And I think with social media and with wokeness, it's been so difficult for people to progress and to try to be better. It's like I'm not saying like Darth Vader should be like in charge of the rebels after what he did, but like we cheer for that. We cheer when he throws the emperor off the thing, right? Like we have to have some.
So
we have to give room for that.
I want to be clear. I don't think that anybody is purely just the embodiment of all that is evil and can do nothing good. I mean, like, of course not. And I also don't know what you mean by like where my atheism drove me or whatever. Like, I don't know where we're going with that. And I also don't. I don't know where you're driving to here. I just, it sounds to me like we're largely on the same page, but like, I don't.
Well, you said that no president has ever been as moral as you, but that's my question. Is like, oh, I thought that's what you said. Did you? So sorry, I don't want to misquote you. What did you say? Did you say none of them would govern? Is that what it is?
I said that none of them like meet my standard, but like I didn't say they were less moral than me or anything like that. It just I'm not. I specifically made it a point to say that I should not be a moral bar here because I have very quixotic. Yes, I should not be. I have very quixotic pie in the sky morality, that I think it is nature to fail at from time to time. I agree that trying is what's important. I agree that people are the product of their times and that there's some give and take there. I literally just listed off 3 examples of presidents who had done and said awful shit, but also accomplished good things that I liked. And so, like,
but wouldn't you?
There's a reason.
But wouldn't you? But wouldn't you agree that, I mean, to me, America, the reason I love the reason I am here, I mean, I was born here, but also the reason that I truly do authentically love America is because it is the first nation built. And again, I know this is, I believe, likely antithetical to your ideology, but not to mine that it is, you know, in terms of what it was structured upon, but it is the first nation in history, and that every other nation is sort of, in some small way or not, has tried to adopt. It is the first nation that was necessarily built for the first time, not on a fear morality, not on what conservatism constructs. You know, it was built, it was really, I mean, we say life, liberty. Well, I believe it was. Well, not I believe it was. It fundamentally was in terms of the construction of the living document that sort of defines the nation in which we live. And again, it is a living document. So irrespective of what we might believe where it started, it's living. We can change it as we will. I understand his position about money and politics. Personally, it's one person, one vote. If somebody wants to argue about machine interference, they can. But to me, it's one person, one vote. So I don't agree with his. I agree. Money shouldn't be.
I just want to be very clear.
Yeah, go for it.
You said we're the first nation in history to not have this fear-based like social system where we're all
correct. We're not a
free.
Nation founded on survival. We're not a nation founded on survival. We're a nation founded on liberty.
We absolutely are founded on survival. Because we're humans.
I don't agree.
And we live in the nature where we need to survive.
So that's a moral system you hold. I fundamentally disagree with your moral system, but that's fine. Go on.
But also, when you say we were founded on liberty, no, we fucking weren't. We were founded on liberty for white male landowners. And that's the liberty that we were founded on.
Via a living document that can change that premise at any time.
Sure. And has, I suppose. And also correct. There's the issue of the fact that like it hasn't been that way ever in this country in a real sense. We have always been capitalist as well. So like that's
because
never really been a thing.
Because of your ideology, that's what I'm saying. Which is that balance.
We weren't capitalist because of my ideology. We just were capitalists this whole time.
No, yes, we were capitalists because of your ideology. Because whatever economic system you want to use, I mean, they're all a fear-based concept. They're not.
No, they're not.
You say that you're like this free, woke, whatever, but that's not really true. You have these grounded, adherent things that have to do with with survival that you put as paramount. And I fundamentally disagree. I believe, and again, you can see it that I'm a theist. I know that our creator, or that which did create us, seeks liberty over life because, you know, life can and does exist absent liberty. So that's my ideology, and then I understand it's separate from yours. But that's the point of the balance and the try.
Really quickly, I have so much to say about this, but you're drawing this line between my ideology as an atheist. Qasim is also a theist. Yeah. I say Qasim, pardon me. I'm just hyped. You are also so as a theist, Qasim, what do you make of what he's saying?
I honestly, Brett, I gotta confess, I'm not sure what point you're trying to make with that. I'm trying to understand why you object to us being critical of the United States. I mean, the great James Baldwin said,
no, I'm not saying don't be critical.
I'm sorry.
Let the man finish.
James Baldwin said, I love America more than any other country in the world, and it is exactly for this reason I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. And you want to talk about our founding documents, there's a reason why it starts, you know, a more perfect union is in our founding documents, that we are trying to create a more perfect union. And so from that perspective, Forrest, as an atheist, me as a theist, are both united in being critical of the injustices, calling them out, acknowledging them for what they are, and demanding better. I don't think it's a bad thing to say that these presidents haven't met that standard. I think that's kind of what our founding documents call us to do, whether you're an atheist or a believer of, or any variation in between. So I'm not sure what about that is contrary to what you're saying.
What's wrong about it is, to me, and again, this is what wokeness has fundamentally presented to, I think, most of us who are center-ish, right? It has presented this idea that there is indeed not this, what you just described, this we must strive for a more perfect union, but in fact that perfect does in fact exist. And by Forrest saying, like, he's like, well, I'm super woke, and to imply, ergo, this is a moral progression, that there is this moral perfectness, and I think that's the flaw. Well,
I
feel like that's what. Okay, well, I think there must be an answer to every single question, moral question. You have to have an answer for it yourself, correct, Forrest? You, as an individual, you have an answer. You don't have an answer if I ask you, is this right or wrong? You don't have a belief?
Of course I have a belief, but I'm not saying it's an objective truth.
Okay, but but that's the whole point about wokeness, is that that's what we're on the center position, we're observing.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I believe that morality is a multidimensional landscape. I don't think that there is a set right or wrong answer. There are very, very few things that I think are definitively right or wrong. So I don't have a believe in a truly objective morality or anything like that. I can create objective frameworks upon which I base some morality, but it is about improving and getting better over time. And like, I've never said that anything like what you're claiming. Also, like, I was going to let it slide, but holy fuck, you've used the word wokeness like every other breath for the last 5 minutes. What is wokeness, Brett?
I've tried to on purpose. Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, what is it? Can you define what wokeness is to you? I have no idea what your definition is.
I think what I perceive wokeness to be is an absolute moral system or a moral position that supersedes all moral positions, defined by some kind of a perfect integration of what would be like that would like define efficiency and perfect equality of if you manifest equity, that everyone will arrive to the closest point, and that point right there, that little circular dot, is itself the ideology that is in pursuit that we call wokeness. That's what it seems like. It's like a pyramid of that, like all pointing to that central exactness, the same way you might have a fundamentalist Christian have this absolute 0 point that specific Christian believes, or that Muslim. It's a singular point that everything is trying to be funneled towards. And on the path to that, there is condemnation for there's some weirdness that's associated with it, and I don't even know if it's unique to wokeness, but there's some weirdness that has to do with a hyper desire to be moral publicly. So, like, I can say definitively that I objectively, by my actions, do support child slave labor and child slaves dying in cobalt mines. I do that because, for the comfort and my convenience, I purchase an iPhone, right? So I do that freely, and I know that I do that. But in the contrast to that, there's then this pursuit to be the perfect moral agent. And I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe that's what people, when they were responding to wokeness as an ideal or an ideology, that's what I'm responding to in my, like, kind of revulsion to it. It's this, like, there is this, I am a perfectly moral agent, and don't you know I am, and I am more moral than you. And it feels very like religion. It feels very, very similar to me like that. Was that too much, or was that okay?
So I feel like I need to lie down. Just a summary
Okay.
is you've just described having a moral framework and being passionate about it, and sometimes you're a bit of a
Yes.
dick about it. That's wokeness.
Yeah, but I would say it's ubiquitous. I would say it's ubiquitous with wokeness. I think if you have someone who is not I'm just going to say it, a far leftist, if you want to say wokeness, I think if you have a far left, and again, this is far right as well, but if you have a far leftist, but I think we just see it more because more young people are far leftist. So more young people are on social media because they have the time. So we're just seeing it more than we would if all the far right people were younger, but they're usually older. So
What? So just if, goddamn, dude, if wokeness is being passionate about trying to make the world a better place, even to the point of that you risk being a little bit obnoxious about it, then the antithesis of that is being either complacent to or complicit in the world being a shittier, worse place. Are you saying
no,
you
can try to make things no, you can try to make things better while acknowledging that you do not meet the standard that you wish you could. And that's what I think wokeness denies. I think wokeness as an ideology denies that. It seems to encapsulate, especially younger people, into this position.
Can you give me an example of somebody who claims to be perfectly moral and not making any mistakes and is the embodiment of the utopia that they seek to achieve? Can you give me an example of that kind of person?
What I could say is that, and I'll do my best to say it, is that you can have it in a circumstance.
So that's a no. It sounds like. I think it is accurately. It's
Brett.
I get called woke on the daily. This whole show has been about how.
But you understand why, right? I mean, you understand why.
Yet, no, I don't, because at no point have either Qasim or I even hinted that we are perfectly moral or that we are the guiding light to the beacon of hope that is the utopian future. I would not be.
You would.
I would not be.
You would be. That's what. But you would be to you. So if you're, let's say,
can you give me an example of a time when I have claimed to be a moral authority on any subject ever?
You're a moral authority on you, on what you believe. So if I come to you and I say,
so are
is it
you,
right or
Brett?
wrong to do?
You're a moral authority on you.
Correct, but I don't meet that moral authority by then saying, let's say you ask me about Israel-Palestine. I wouldn't necessarily say that in all these discernments, every discernment I have on that specific question, that I am definitely correct, that my morality is objectively true. You might be pressed.
Just established that neither one of us would do that either, right? We were all here for that part of the conversation 5 minutes ago.
So what is your answer to Israel-Palestine? You tell me your answer and because it has to be the thing you believe, right? So you think it is the moral thing. So what is it? What is your answer?
The genocide should end.
That's not a complete answer. That's one step towards a goal. So what is the final answer?
But I'm not
what should happen?
I'm not a politician and I'm not a lawyer.
You don't have to be.
And I don't know. And
Doesn't matter.
don't know. Fucking God damn it, Brett. Just hear me out for a second, all right? I am acknowledging my limitations and saying there's a deep political history here that goes back decades that I don't fully comprehend, and people should get together and reason out a solution that is equitable and fair as possible for everybody. The people who are currently living in Israel that were born there as Israelis are not responsible for the circumstances of the beginning of their government or their state, the same way that I'm not. And I could sit here and say that this country should be given back to the Native Americans, but I'm not responsible for that genocide because I was born as an American, so that would be unfair to Americans today. And so I can argue these things. It's not my job. I'm just a biologist. So I know genocide is wrong, and I should say, I can say for sure the genocide should end, and then we should start talking about how to make things better for everybody. But step one, immediately, the genocide should end. That's my argument. That's my answer. I think that is an unobjectable thing, is that genocide's bad.
And Brett, I'll add to that.
But not in all. Is it in all circumstances? You based on your morality,
Yes.
is genocide bad?
Genocide is
Literally,
always bad.
Genocide
yes.
is always bad.
Genocide is always
Yes.
bad. Yes, absolutely bad. There's no
So irrespective of what might occur. So if someone is
Brett, can you give me one example of a situation in which genocide would be morally good?
I wonder if there is. I wasn't ready to answer that question, but I probably did back myself into something like that.
It's weird that you have to think about it. I'll be honest with you.
No, I don't think it's that weird, because I think that because your morality is survival first. That is, as I understand it, that is the basis of of the core, most intimate, primal, whatever you want to call it, goal is survival. That's which is, again, that's most conservatives, but that is also your morality.
Not
and you say it's because we're animals, so that's no. Okay, so would you let's just get like the last 5 humans on Earth or something, I don't know, and like 2 of them have a disease, or I guess we need more than that for diversity, but like, you know, a couple of them have they're you know, not zombified, infected, whatever, but so to eradicate those human agents, I kind of feel like yes, but that's a pretty extremist position.
I still disagree with you, Brett.
Okay, I don't know that I agree with that. I think that's an interesting. You know, if it means that survival, we've seen that happen a million times. And I guess you might be defining genocide in a very specific way, and maybe that's the clarification.
I'm defining genocide by the definition.
You're right. So you mean based on a religion, race? Yeah, I would agree that I meant more like a section. Oh, not okay. Maybe go on. Sorry.
Holy shit, Brett! Like fucking. Do you know the definition of the word genocide?
Well, I thought genocide was an eradication of a people based on race, religion, etc. I didn't think it was an eradicate or ethnicity. I didn't think it was an eradication. I wasn't sure if it was an eradication of people based on their grouping. So, for instance, like if we genocided a people who were bringing a disease to a location that would then eradicate all the people at that location, I think maybe perhaps in history, maybe I can conjure some ideas of maybe that would be something that people would do in the pursuit of survival. I think. I would have to think more on that. I think
just two things. Number one, that's not what genocide is. Genocide. Okay, then does. Oh my God! I'm just gonna start talking, and we're gonna see how far we can get. Genocide is specifically the intentional destruction, either in whole or in part, of a racial, ethnic, political, social, whatever group of people that are all unified by some characteristic. It is the destruction of that group, either in whole or in part, intentionally by one of 5 means. Number 1 is killing members of the group. Number 2 is causing severe mental or bodily harm to members of the group. Number 3 is creating conditions of life meant to bring about the destruction of the group, either in whole or in part. Number 4 is preventing births within the group. And number 5 is moving children, transferring children from that group to another group. It is a very, very specific definition about eradicating not everybody in a group necessarily, but either in whole or in part, this chunk of people. That's what genocide is. Intentionally getting rid of, in whole or in part, this chunk of people by way of any of those 5 methods. That's what genocide is. There is no circumstance in which that is a good thing. Now, hold the fuck on, Brett. Jesus fucking Christ. Now, what you said, talking about killing people that are carrying some disease or something like that, has nothing the fuck to do with genocide, because that's not an identifier group. And also, yes, that would still be wrong, because that still violates another of my core moral principles, which is autonomy. And so telling people, you are sick with this thing and you are a threat to me, therefore I am going to end your life, is immoral. So either way you slice this, you have made an immoral situation that has nothing to do with survival. It has to do with basic fundamental human rights. Holy fuck. It took you 20 minutes of rambling about what the fuck you were thinking about to finally get me to just explain my position for 2 seconds rather than you telling me what you think my position is. Good Lord, dude.
No, I don't think I agree with what you're presenting. Again, I'd have to spend more time thinking about it, but I don't think
what part don't you agree with? Do you not agree with my moral opinion? Because who cares? Or do you not agree with the definition of genocide?
I think that if a people, and again, I think that I'm obviously, it's hard because you're saying that these people have to be docile. Is that part of the genocide? They have to be docile and non-combative. Would that be part of it?
No.
Or no.
No, what
So
I literally just gave you the definition. What part of the definition that I just gave you included the word docile?
So docile is not. So they can be combative, and I can't eradicate them?
Literally, yes.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. That's insane.
Brett?
If two people,
are you a Christian?
Two people came into my house to kill me, if two people came into my house to kill me, and I eradicated those two people.
That's
Brett,
not
what's up?
No. Defending
Jesus
yourself
fucking
when you're
Christ.
actively being attacked. Defending yourself when you're actively being attacked until the attack is no more is very different than intentional genocide of innocent people. It's like you're conflating two things that have zero connectivity. Well, so somebody breaks into my house and tries to kill me, and I defend myself. That's not genocide. That's not how that works.
Brett,
Even if I eradicate the entire group.
Brett, home invader is not a racial, religious, or ethnic group. What the fuck is so hard about this?
No, you also said political affiliation. So a Nazi is also...
Yes.
So if five Nazis attack me, and those are all the Nazis in the world, there's 5 Nazis left, and those 5 Nazis attack me, and I eradicate Nazis from place.
Brett, are you killing them because they're attacking you, or are you killing them because they're Nazis?
Well, but their ideology promotes their attacking and eradication of me, so that's why they're attacking me. What do you mean?
Are you defending yourself, or are you going out of your way to kill them because of their identity? Which one is it?
So your question is, am I preemptively killing them before they kill me? Because I believe that necessarily based on their...
That's not what my question was. No,
well, why don't you ask
I'm not
question?
Going to change my question to make it easier for you.
Okay, all right.
I don't want to ask that question because it's a dumbass question. That's why I didn't ask it.
We do it all the time. We preemptively kill all the time. That's what we do. That's what every human does.
Wrong.
Yeah. Who's defending that?
It's not wrong.
And no, it's not what every human does. It's not what every human does. I have never preemptively killed anybody.
But you would if you were in the situation in which we have done it. If we know someone's going to come... Bro, what are you talking about? We would definitely shoot down a plane that was aimed at New York, irrespective of whether or not the plane actually impacted New York, because we would assume it's going to. So we would shoot them down.
Brett, attacking New York is not an identity group. Fuck, man. How hard is this? You keep fucking up in the exact same way. And at this point, I'm starting to think that it's a deliberate
attack. Drove them to do it.
Brett, I am begging you to actually think about what we're actually saying to you, not what you want us to say. Because you keep fucking up in the exact same...
Is this thing docile?
I'm gonna mute you because you literally cannot stop interrupting when we're just trying to explain the fundamental definitions of the words we're using. It took 20 minutes of you rambling about bullshit to finally get my 1-sentence summary of my own position, and now you're rambling about other bullshit rather than addressing the fucking definition of genocide that we gave you. I leave it up to you, amigo mio. You're our guest. It's been 38 minutes of this. Do you think that it's worth pursuing this conversation any further, or do you think we've hit the same brick wall enough times? What do you think?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've exhausted this. I mean, I struggle to continue when the definition of genocide isn't agreed upon, when it's already a textbook definition defined, by the way, by a lawyer who survived the Holocaust, a Jewish lawyer who survived the Holocaust. If you're questioning that, I don't know what to tell you.
I can't get it across to you any more clearly. Just because someone attacks you doesn't mean you get to do genocide. And home invader, bomber, what? Those are not identity groups. So attacking someone and defending yourself is not the same thing as genocide. If you can understand those 2 points, maybe you'll understand why the shit you said in this call is just dumb as all fuck. But I'm not going to continue with it, Brett. It's been real weird for the past 38 minutes. Have an awesome rest of your night. Bye-bye. What a way to end it. I thought the first call was crazy, and then we got into that.
Kudos to you, man. You got patience of a saint. You got patience of a saint. I hope I'm not making a moral judgment by saying that about you, but man, I don't know if I have that.
Today, I learned that America was capitalist in 1776 because I'm an atheist today.
There you go.
Who knew?
Clear as mud. Yeah.
That was our last call. We had a couple more waiting, but it was we weren't able to get them in, and so we ended up just kind of wrapping the show there to make sure that we were close to the timestamp we were going for. Qasim, man, I appreciate the hell out of you just taking a couple hours out of your day. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but you have been absolutely fantastic. I've loved, again, everything you brought to the table today.
Thanks, man. No, it's always good to vibe off of somebody who's got the similar energy and focus on something as simple as, hey, human beings deserve to be treated as human beings, and let's not kill them. Like, it's such a low bar, but unfortunately, it's kind of hard to find nowadays. So I appreciate that with you. I definitely want to do this again, and maybe next time we tell folks you got 10 minutes to make your point, or we're going to move on to the next caller, because I definitely enjoyed the conversations, but I found at some points these folks were not willing to have an honest dialogue. I mean, it's wild, but I still enjoy doing these kinds of things, though.
It is, and it's the nature of these shows, because, like, yeah, I've worked with some hosts that do that. They try to, like, keep the call under 10 minutes, and they try to really stick to it. And inevitably, we get the caller say, well, you didn't let me really get to the point. And then also, if we let them talk the whole time, and you know, I like you said, I'm much more relaxed. I try to be really patient. I try to let them really say what they're trying to say. And then we get bogged down in 50 different things. So, like, there's pros and cons.
I would never, if I had a bingo card, I would never have selected Guy defends genocide as good, actually, as one of the things on the bingo card.
But only sometimes. At least we got that. I love also, there's one thing you and I had both spoken about before the show, if you don't mind me taking just a quick second to say.
Please, yeah, go for it.
Before the show, we talked about the fact, we mentioned briefly, you're a theist, and I'm an atheist, this is atheist heavy network. You're not the first theist that I brought on, but we did, like, you and I both spoke about the fact that how important it is that these principles that we're talking about here are so incredibly unifying across, like, backgrounds and ideologies, and also think, like I said, I've yet to hear you say anything that I strongly disagree with, because we haven't talked about religion yet, I suppose. But, like, the fact that you have such incredible insight and like so many incredible things to say, I hope that the atheist community at large, I think this audience is pretty chill, but I know other channels that aren't. I hope that people look at that and kind of are less hostile and try to, like, find things like this that we can work off of, because I think humans are better together. You know what I mean?
Amen to that. I appreciate that. And I will say this to our atheist listeners out there. One of the things that is a foundational principle for me, and I say this specifically as an observant Muslim, is the need for universal freedom of conscience. And that only happens if you have a secular government where religion and state are separate, where there is equal access to knowledge and information and equal opportunity to practice or not practice, to worship or not worship, without government interference and oppression, and then having a government that prevents social interference and oppression. Because it's one thing to say that we're a secular government. It's another thing to say we're a secular government that will make sure that a person who has faith can worship at their mosque, temple, church without social or societal oppression. Likewise, we will ensure that someone who is a non-believer, is an atheist, doesn't feel oppression or isn't forced indoctrination in their schools to have the 10 Commandments thrown in their face every single day of the week. My view is this, that if God exists, I believe he does, but let's just go to the if God exists. if God exists, any God that exists that needs to force you to believe in him is not a God. It's a concoction of your own imagination. A true religion is that which is successful based on the merits of its argument. And if it can't prove itself on the merits of its argument, then discard it, because it's a cult and it has no bearing. It makes no, from the Islamic perspective, it makes no sense that an all-knowing, all-powerful God would create people with the ability to use logic and rationale and then have this universe that follows these laws of physics and science, and then have a religion that contradicts all those things and says, just believe it anyway. I know your eyes tell you one thing, but just believe this. That makes no sense whatsoever. And so for me, when I think about the role religion plays, it plays a profound role in a person's individual life. It should not play like, the idea that, well, I don't eat pork, so therefore you shouldn't have pork either, is insane to me. It's nonsensical to me. It makes no sense whatsoever. But what should happen is, I don't eat pork, you do eat pork. We should live in a society where each of us can make our decisions for ourselves. And so from that standpoint, I have not only no hesitation, but a desire to ensure that every human being, whether they're a believer or non-believer, has absolute freedom of conscience, absolute ability to live their best life. And if I can die knowing that I lived a life ensuring every person had access to that equal justice, then I'm going to die a happy person.
I feel like I'm pretty antagonistic about religion. I make no secret about the fact I'm very anti-theist, and I'll speak out against it. A big part of doing these shows is, I talk about societal harm and things like this. But I think if anyone were to ever actually try to legislate that, to outlaw a religion, to try to take away someone's religion forcefully, like you said, to say that you can't practice it, I would be the first one out there in the streets marching and protesting about it. And I think the people who watch this channel as well, like I said, I'm not just saying this because they're our audience. We try to motivate our community on secularism first. And like we talked about before the show, it is next to impossible to be a dick if you're practicing skepticism appropriately. And so it's just, I that's why I love having conversations with my religious friends about this. Is that if your religion is getting in the way of you being a good person, then I have a problem. You know what I mean? I have a major issue with that. And I want to have more guests on this show from time to time that kind of show that that's not usually, despite the callers that we get on this show all the fucking time. There's a lot of people out there like you. Anyway,
well, that's the funny thing. Okay. Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, we had an atheist. Just real quickly, we had an atheist and a theist, both who I thought had some really bizarre perspectives. But here, as an atheist and a theist, we were able to kind of recognize that the problem with you is not that you're the callers. The problem is not that you're an atheist or a theist. The problem is that your ideas are just stupid, and here's why they're stupid, and here's why we can tell you logically and factually speaking why they're stupid. I'm being blunt about it, but I think that's where, when we talk about, how do we solve the problems of humanity, let's work on ensuring the basics of humanity: food, water, shelter, healthcare, education, clothing. Let's make sure those are met. Yeah. And then if there's time, we can argue about who's in the right religion or whether God even exists. But if you can't show me by your actions you're a good human being, I'm not interested in your religion or non-religion.
I love that. A lot of people, I'm looking at the chat over here, and we have a ton of people saying they want to have you back on the show. That's awesome. And also, I would love to have you host. I love hosting with you as well, but I would also love to see you with one of our other hosts, Josie Caballero. She is a political, I don't know what the right word is, staffer. She has worked in politics for a great long time. Arden, what is Josie's job title?
Well, she has a bunch. I know she was working at the head of this organization that works with the VFA for trans healthcare stuff. I don't know exactly what that was called. She works with A4TE, which is one of the largest trans advocacy organizations in the country. She does. She has a million hats.
We did a couple of shows together during the election cycle, and she, much like you, she actually, the reason why I think about you, she blew me away over and over with just this in-depth knowledge of just the history of oppression in this country, and also the history of political progress, which makes sense. Yeah. She's in politics and you're in law, so it goes together. I would love to see the two of you together. I think you'd knock it out of several parts.
Make it happen. I love that. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. But with that, we're going to start wrapping up. Before we do, Qasim, this is your chance. Tell everybody where to find you and what you're working on and all sorts of other things. Shameless self-promotion.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate the team that put this together. You can find me at my website, QasimRashid.com. If you do QasimRashid.com/subscribe, you can subscribe to my Substack as a free or paid subscriber. I have a rule. None of my content is behind a paywall. It is all accessible to everyone. You don't get any special perks for being a paid subscriber. You just support somebody who is trying to speak truth to power. If it's in your budget, welcome it. If not, don't sweat it. Would love to have you be part of the community. And on all other platforms, I'm at Qasim Rashid.
Love that. Thank you to Arden for producing. Thank you to our skull screener. I believe it was Stephanie Helms tonight. Thank you to Faye Halo for doing the timestamps. Thank you to the people in chat, even the ones that suck. Thank you to the callers, even the ones that suck. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome rest of your day.